Thank you, Herbie. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? We all thumbs up back there? So let me start by seeing who's out here. Who are my restaurant owners, chefs, of the chef and restaurant owner community? Okay. And then who are just home cooks that are really interested in fermentation? Got a few of those. Who are the rest of you? You don't have to answer that, I guess. So I'm going to speak today specifically about helping restaurateurs, chefs incorporate ferments into your program. But I'm going to go through a lot of ferments, and I'm going to go through a lot of hot topics, ideas for you to make at home as well, because home is where the heart is, and we do things at home, and then we go to restaurants to have it be easier or more fun or just have a date night. So let me start by introducing myself. Herbie did a great job, but I am the author and writer and class person extraordinaire. I wrote the Hip Girl's Guide to Homemaking and Hip Girl's Guide to the Kitchen. Those books came about when I was living in New York City, in Brooklyn, when I had $0 and a whole lot of preference for good food, good ingredients. So I had to figure something out pretty quickly, because I was no longer able to buy the $10, $15 jar of pickles any longer. What was in Austin for a terrible loaf of bread. I was gluten-free before everyone else was. And the first breads were like little bricks that you could stick a door, would hold a very heavy door open. So for that terrible brick of bread, it was now like $12, and that was just beyond what I wanted to pay for terrible bread. So I started experimenting. I started thinking to myself, how hard could this be? I was the one voted least likely to be domestic by my mother upon exiting high school, entering college. So a lot of people feel like maybe some of these projects feel inaccessible. They feel if you haven't grown up doing this stuff, or if you haven't grown up in a culture where home and home projects like this are prized, then you're doomed. But no, I'm a case for this, and if I can do it, anybody can. I'm terrible at following directions. I have yet to kill anybody through my jams, preserves, pickles, ferments, all those things that can be told, you can be told they're very dangerous to make. So just wanted to say I'm a case example and letting you know that you can do this. And I wrote my books accordingly. I wrote them for the skeptical, the uninspired, or the very inspired and just feeling out of reach, or the person who kind of has some stuff down but needs help to the next level. So those are what these books are about. The home book was the first one, and then I had so much more to say about the kitchen. I wrote an even longer book just about the kitchen because it's such a fraught place at times. So all the things I'm talking about today, you will find methodology and some recipes. My book is set up more so as a guide to help you make the thing you want to make with whatever ingredient restrictions, additions, things, I don't eat this, or this, so here's how to make this. Instead of just putting a book full of recipes as a cookbook, I really wanted you to get a handle on the technique and methodology and understand how to find the right recipe. So that's what my book is about. There are recipes in there, and the things we will talk about today, many of them, there's actually a recipe inside the book. So fermentation is something that you will definitely see. I think my dad works with Benny Keith, and so he has been sending me restaurant articles and restaurant industry articles for the past 4 years or so saying fermentation, big trends, definitely something hot topic. It's a very accessible type thing to incorporate. Many of you already have fermentation programs and you don't even know it, or you didn't even think about it this way. But if you sell beer and wine, you have a fermentation program already. So you can fancy that up with some additional beverage ferments, and we can add some lactic acid, lacto-fermented additions to your fermentation program, hopefully after we chat today. So fermentation is the very controlled, elegant breakdown of food, or or sugars, more specifically, I guess, carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are broken down. There are two paths for fermentation. There's your beer, wine, mead, beverage ferments that are typically the carbohydrates broken down are sugars, and they are turned into ethanol, alcohol, carbon dioxide. So bubbly, alcoholic, effervescent things, delicious, one path. The other path is using salt, and the salt ferments are the things that produce lactic and acetic acid. So you've got the breakdown of carbohydrates using either salt or sugar, and you will create either deliciously acidic vegetable ferments or ferments of the like that have an acidic and great flavor, or you'll create fermented beverages that are delicious, and they can be varying ranges of alcoholic. They're not all strong alcohol ferments. Over time, things like kombucha, kefir, kvass, those are all great ferments that I'll talk about in a minute. They're all ferments in that way that that allow us to get good probiotics in our body without alcohol content. So there is something for everyone here. So there are a lot of great projects, but I think first let's start with a list of common fermented things that you may already be familiar with. We've got your beer and wine. Vinegar is a fermented product, although if you're buying it from a food service distributor, it's probably already dead. So you can make live probiotic vinegars out of your fruit scraps, either in your establishment or in your home, and you can have this completely free project, only needing to add sugar and water to have a live probiotic vinegar that you can then add to drinks. You can put it in like roast meats and things, pork chops, get all the places where you would use vinegar, you'll have your own live probiotic one. So that's another thing. Cheese and yogurt, probably are familiar with the fact that cheese and yogurt are fermented foods. We get a lot of probiotic marketing from our yogurt advertisers. Those yogurts that are on the shelf and that you can obviously order for your establishments, that yogurt is great. They're still probiotic, but making your own is using wild culture. You can use wild yeasts, wild microorganisms based on the starter culture you get plus your local environment, and you'll end up with the same great quality ingredients, and they're things that you have more control over. So making your own kefirs and yogurts are an option. Another thing I've just mentioned is kefir. It's a relative of yogurt. I don't know, many people drink it. It's on the health food shelves now. Some people say it kefir. I think kefir is the lime leaf, so I don't know. You say it how you want it, but it's delicious, and you can make it very easily within your establishment or at home. And then most people know pickles and krauts and kimchi are also traditionally fermented foods, though since the Industrial Revolution has changed our food processing systems, and now we can high heat process everything in vinegar, we can cut out the most delicious and nutritious way to acidify things by just pouring vinegar over them, dead vinegar, and then killing it even further by canning it high heat. So there's nothing wrong with that path, but if you are looking to incorporate and talk more about the probiotic offerings on your menu, you'll want to go with the ferments that are not pasteurized and that are sold in the refrigerated cases or by refrigerated means and delivered by those cold trucks. So some of the trend things that we might notice popping up, this is not a new thing, but maybe to restaurants over in different areas it may be a new thing. So kombucha, everyone familiar with kombucha? It's that tart, kind of fizzy tart drink that is a black tea or type of caffeinated tea, mostly black teas, that are fermented with the addition of a little pancake called a SCOBY. It's so weird. I brought my SCOBY when I did an an event in New York City from Austin, I traveled with my SCOBY, and the TSA did not know what to do with me with my SCOBY. But SCOBY stands for, it's not Scooby's shortened name, it's the symbiotic colony or community of bacteria, yeasts and microbes and something in there. There's enough letters, and it's just a little happy pancake full of lots of different strains of cultures, microorganisms that all do a certain job. You need that little pancake in order to make kombucha. You will end up with that little pancake when you make vinegars, by the way. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so kombucha is on the hot list. Obviously something you can buy, you can make. Mead is wine, but that's fermented, it's honey. Honey is fermented over time and makes a delicious, sweeter, very interesting flavored drink called mead. Miso is something that a lot of restaurants are pulling in their own. One of the restaurants, I live in Austin, there's a restaurant called Daidue, and they are using their own soybeans, and then they were making a sweet potato miso. So they're making like all sorts of like misos out of really cool, interesting, local, seasonal things. Tempeh, something you probably have already heard about. That's also a fermented bean scenario that is used often instead of meats. So that's a really neat ferment. Kimchi I just talked about, but there's over 100 different varieties of Korean kimchi. Kimchi is a palate cleanser in the Korean tradition. It's all over there are variations of Asian communities that even just in Korea, north, south, it is made all differently all across the countries. And I liken it to the southern biscuit. Like there's like a million recipes for the biscuit that is the one biscuit recipe, the perfect one. So, and it's all regional or say barbecue sauce. You've got your North Carolina, you've got your Texas, you've got all the other places, but really it's just Texas. Let's be serious. So anyhow, so kimchi is really great. Kimchi is a great project because you can incorporate everything that you've got. Half the things that I see behind me could be thrown into a really cool kimchi. So you can make seasonal. You can do a white pear kimchi with fruit in it. You can do traditional kimchi that has dried shrimp or dried fish in it if you're wanting to go the original route. So kimchi is a really great place to go, and it's easy. So we'll talk about some of these things as I move along. I only have 30 minutes to cover all of fermentation in the world. So I want to try to keep on track and leave a few minutes to answer some questions too. I talked about kefir. There's a thing called water kefir, which is the same little SCOBY that I was talking about, the little pancake deal, but they are shaped like grains. They look like inflated porridge grains, and you can just do sugar water with those grains and create effervescent probiotic beverages. You can make live probiotic sodas in your establishment with just sugar and water. The grains slowly break down, by eating that sugar, the grains break down those sugars and create acids. So it makes a tart little soda that you can use either for effervescence and other things instead of club soda, or you can just make that the base and add other infusions after you ferment it. Kvass I mentioned as well. Traditionally, kvass is made from old bread. So you take your old bread and you ferment the bread into a beverage. Kvass was one of the earliest ferments out there 5,000 years ago. The earliest beer making records included people fermenting with their old bread, making beverages out of their old bread. So delicious, fun fact from the past. Sourdough is another thing. I put that on the trend list because sourdough bread in itself, that's probably not news to anybody, but a lot of places are using a sourdough starter to make really delicious things that end up on the brunch menu, that end up on the dinner menu, and or even just the lunch menu, like sourdough bun type stuff. But you can again, that restaurant that I referenced, Dai Due, they make a fermented sourdough pancake for a brunch menu and put all sorts of delicious stuff on it. So wonderful, such a great idea. And it's live, you know, like bread is alive, I guess before you toast it, but anyway, it's delicious. Dead bacteria is still good, better than no bacteria. So let's talk for a minute just about equipment and things that you'll need for ferments. For our path for fermenting lactic acid, lactobacillus, lacto-fermented foods, that's the salt path that I was talking about earlier. You're going to need something big and some vegetables, something to cut the vegetables up with, either shredding them or cutting them into pieces that could be your pickles bobbing in a brine. And you're going to need something heavy to put over them. So in restaurants, the Cambros are great. You know, that's food grade plastic that's, you know, if that's what you've got to go with, then go with that. At home, if you get really into it, you can purchase a crock. This is a quart-sized mason jar. You do not have to get the pretty blue ones, but get the half gallon. The 32 is the quart, so the half gallon is 64 ounces. You can even find the gallon ones, but they're usually more in the decorative realm because heaven forbid people want to actually use them. Restaurants, you may have olives that come in a glass gallon jar in your bar program. Use those glass gallon jars and you have a built-in fermenting vessel. What I like about those gallon jars that are just plain glass gallon jars, I like that you can stick another jar inside of it to be the weight. So you need something to weight it down. A crock will come with these little half donuts for you to layer this on top of the veggies and be able to extract it and put it in. If it came whole, you wouldn't be able to get it in there. But you're going to just need something to weight down. There are millions of products out there for people to sell you things to make your life easy in fermentation land. One of the things is that I find the most helpful for home ferments or for the next size up are these pickle pebbles. Many people make these. This is just one brand of them. I do not work for them, nor do I don't think they're here, but they can thank me in extra pebbles. But they send me stuff to share, but I've used other brands and they're just as great. They're just a glass disc that fits really nicely inside a jar like so. So these are the types of equipment. But you know, at the end of the day, you can just use, if you're making sauerkraut, for example, you need cabbage and salt. Those are the only two ingredients you need to make sauerkraut that has a brine, that will eventually have a brine. You know, you may want to have juniper, you may want to have black pepper, you may want to have dill flowers, whole dill seeds in your flavoring compounds, but all you need really is just cabbage and salt. So we need to, in some ferments, we need to shred them up. In order for the vegetable to release the water, we need the most surface area we can. That salt helps do a number of things that I'm not going to have enough time to discuss all the actuals of. But the salt is the process that extracts the water out of the vegetable to make your brine. Your brine is going to end up being taller and come over your shredded veggies. So your shredded veggies can include cabbage, carrots, beets, anything that retains its structure when shredded. I really like to do peppers as a just salted ferment. It makes a great, really interesting flavor. Fermentation is the most, preserving via fermentation is the most, it's been around for before recorded time, because having salt around and no refrigeration, people needed time to eat their food, you know, like things we lived a nomadic lifestyle, or if you lived in the same place, you needed somewhere, and there were no refrigerators hanging around for you to store your food in. So let's talk about a few of the health benefits of fermentation that you're going to see and why this is a hot topic, hot trend type food. The bacterial life within our foods helps our gut bacteria. The bacteria eats, I'd say bacteria, but yeast, microbes, other microorganisms, the community of bacteria that is exclusive to whatever ferment you're doing. It's a pre-digestion. Think of somebody helping you out in a non-gross way to help you eat your food and help you absorb and assimilate vitamins and minerals. So that's really great. For lacto-fermented foods, and when I say lacto-fermented, I mean it's the type of bacteria. Lactobacillus is the end result bacteria, and that is pretty much everything in that salt realm. If you let it salt and vegetable, it will turn into lactobacillus eventually. And there's no milk in that. There's no milk products. It's not lactic. It's the same bacteria that when you culture milk, you end up with, but it is not. There is no milk product in there. Fermented foods increase B vitamins. So specifically Bs 1 through 3, riboflavin, niacin, and thiamine, you actually get more B vitamins by fermenting a food before than just eating it raw. You get a detoxification factor. Probiotics we already touched on. Lactic acid cuts down on pathogens in the gut and overall just supports the gut community. I think you can find studies out there that the gut microbial community is connected. This is kind of a duh, but the science has just proven this. But your brain and depression and things dealing with the brain and your neurons is very tied to your gut microbial community. So eat some sauerkraut, feel better in a number of different ways. And then just aiding in digestion, and you'd think it maybe is counterintuitive, but eating a lacto-fermented, somewhat acidic food will actually help you regulate the acids in the stomach. Because of having a healthy gut flora, you have helpers to do so. I want to mention, before I run out of time here, I want to mention some tips for success for those restaurateurs, and then I'll take some questions so I can speak specifically in the next 7 minutes about what you'd like to hear. So restaurants can hire somebody, how to start a fermentation program in your restaurant. You can hire somebody to actually start and manage the program. What's great is that you would find those people around, in the hotbeds for like the restaurants around town that already offer. You can kind of sniff out the person, depending on your community. They'll have your HACCP planning, they'll have your methodology, they'll get that all in place for you. If your budget does not include somebody paying them to contract to start this program and manage it and get it rolling, you can always get a lesson for your chef. You can have somebody who teaches fermentation workshops. I don't teach a ton, so I'm not offering myself up, but I can maybe help you if you're in the Austin area, in Houston, maybe in Dallas. But you can get a lesson for your chef. I teach many restaurateur chefs. I teach many chefs how to get a few projects underway so that their establishment can offer these. And so then when you are starting projects, you can use starter cultures because you'll get a more consistent result. There's a company called Caldwell's. They make a starter culture for lactic acid ferments. So no matter what, if you use no starter, you will wild ferment, and that will be amazing. But that might be something that when you're really relying on ending up with 20 pounds of sauerkraut at the end of this process, it might be best for the restaurant to go the path of having a controlled starter culture that the bacterial strains that are in there. I have not, I think in my 10 years of fermenting things, I've only had heat-related issues because the ideal temperature for ferments is 65 to 70 degrees. There's another restaurant in Austin called Emmer and Rye, and they have a little closet that maintains this constant temperature, and it's actually got a glass door on it so you can see the cool fermenting projects in there. It's really great. You don't have to go to that level, of course, but they're committed to fermenting whatever they can find that's in season and making value-added items for their menu. So starter cultures, And then, you know, at the end of this, buy them from someplace. You know, buy good quality ferments that are not pasteurized. I think I mentioned that before. There's companies. I do not. You know, no one pays me money, though they should. But Wild Brine is one company that makes really good quality live cultured products that they sell for wholesale and retail. Bubby's is another company that makes true fermented pickles. The pickles that you see on the grocery shelf, even the ones that are the ones in the grocery section, the ones I grew up on, are sort of fake fermented pickles. They just have chemicals in them that make them sort of acidic and stay the same forever, and they taste kind of pickly thanks to the food flavoring industry of the world. But true fermented vegetables, pickles. The other project I mentioned, shredded veggies. The other project is to pour salt water over the top of your veggies and ferment your own pickles, like Lower East Side dill style. You don't have to use a barrel, and you don't have to put them in basements in New York to do this, but you want to find a place that's 65 to 70 degrees and try to keep that temp. That's sort of impossible in home kitchens, home households, you know, unless you want to pay $1 billion electricity bill. So during hot months, I recommend to people ferment what's in season. So you're not going to be making sauerkraut at your house in the middle of summer. Sauerkraut's really a winter crop, so you're going to have the best results with something. But you can totally fudge it. You know, I've had to make kraut in the middle of the summer, so I put it in my guest room where it happens to be the coolest, and my guests get a nice pickly aroma when they come visit. So you just do what you can. And one thing I really like the most about fermented projects is that it does not require all this equipment. It doesn't require the airlock and the more formal equipment that you're going to need if you're making beer and you're making wine. You need equipment. You need serious equipment, and you need it to be sterile. You need all this stuff to happen. But with making lactic acid ferments and fermented projects like making your own vinegar, which all this is in the kitchen book, how to do so, how to make your own vinegar, how to make your own kimchi, krauts, good recipes to do so. But you don't need all this stuff because you just need something to lay on the veggies. Maybe that's, if you're making kraut, for example, you take the outer, thicker, hardier piece of cabbage that didn't look great, it's not moldy or terrible, but you make a veggie, what I call a little veggie shelf to keep your shreddies underneath the brine, and then you just put something heavy in this jar in order to keep a jelly jar, which I didn't bring. An 8-ounce jelly jar fits nicely inside the wide mouth jar, so you can actually rig these up pretty great. And I like to put a little muslin, either a flour sack towel or a muslin grain bag over the top to keep the pretend. I'm going to make you use your imaginations on this Sunday midday, but pretend this is full of veggies, and this is a jar, and it's weighing my veggies down, and it's busy creating a brine. I put a little hat over the top so that all the flying things don't land and actually come and touch, because we want all of the veggie matter to be underneath the brine in order for the aerobic fermentation process to take place. I'll also be selling books. They are $19.99 plus tax, and I'll autograph them for your favorite hip homie, whether that's you or whether that is somebody that you know. And I also wanted to add one more thing. I wrote the book. I'm like waving around. I'm feeling kind of motivated. But I wrote the book and used an apostrophe very specifically to say that I'm the hip girl. So people do not need to feel worried or nervous about their sexuality by opening up the Hip Girl's Guide to Homemaking. I'm not saying, hey, you girls, read this book. I'm saying, hey, you people, I'm the hip girl. I'm telling you what it's about. So you can feel free to call yourself whatever you would like. Hip person, hip woman, hip man, hip homie in general. Thank you all for listening to me chat about the fastest fermentation workshop ever.